A global financial crisis, a financial crisis that affects many countries at the same time. It is a period of severe difficulties which financial institutions, markets, companies and consumers experience simultaneously. During a global financial crisis, financial institutions lose faith and stop lending to each other and traders stop buying financial instruments. In civil law jurisdictions, abuse of rights is the exercise of a legal right only to cause annoyance, harm, and injury to another. The abuser is liable for the harm caused by their actions, for example, bribery and corruption. The Sustainable Development Goals that related to these challenges are Goal 8 and Goal 16. Goal 8 is to promote inclusive, long-term economic growth, sufficient and efficient employment, and decent work for all people. And Goal 16 focuses on creating peaceful and inclusive communities for long-term development, ensuring that everyone has access to justice. According to United Nations Objective by 2030, the globe will have significantly reduced corruption and bribery in all of its manifestations. Goal 16 also assures that decision-making is responsive, inclusive and representational at all levels. Because employees are directly involved in decision-making, this goal has a big influence on the battle for peace and rights in the workplace. For the global economic crisis, this issue can be solved or improved by implementing the targets set in Goal 8. In the global economic crisis, the world faced a lot of difficulties in economics such as unemployment, currency, and so on. One of the targets in Goal 8 is to promote youth employment, education, and training to reduce unemployment rate and also increase the quality of employees that have great skills and enough training.
There are many misuse and abuse of rights exist in the global economic crisis such as human rights violation, socio-economic inequality, and financial system abuse. In respect of human rights violation, there are various types of human rights such as human rights for children, human rights to get healthcare, and etc. When these human rights are violated by a party, it causes abuse of rights such as corruption of power by higher authority. Secondly, socio-economic inequality relates to an imbalance and wide gap in income among the poor and the rich. For instance, the poor may use malicious means to gain fast money such as by using fraudulent transactions online and stealing others' profile pictures and information to deceive others on social media. Lastly, financial abuse such as favoring a project created by a high-ranking person for their interest like the 1MDB scandal, which proved the financial system of a country is manipulated to achieve one's interest and hence indirectly deceiving the country of its hard-earned money.
So here I will talk a bit about the impact of austerity measure in the economic system on the life of children and women. Before that, what are the austerity measures in the economy?
Austerity measure is an economic policy implemented by the government to reduce government spending, to reduce public debt and close the budget deficit. It includes cut and limit on pay bill, subsidy reduction, cut in social protection program, old age pension renewal, and an increase in consumption tax on the basic goods and services.
Of course, austerity measures have an impact, especially on children and women. But what is the impact of austerity measure on the economic system on the right of children and women?
The first is the impact on children's education. No doubt this austerity measure will cause a low-income or unemployed family to face difficult situations when they have to bear the higher schooling burden of their children. This situation has forced many children to leave school and some of them may go out to work to help ease the burden of their family to earn money to buy food. Therefore, the government action to implement austerity measure on the economy will affect the right of children who are supposed to go to school to acquire knowledge.
Second is the impact of the economic crisis on sexual exploitation and persecution. Austerity measures affect the right of women who are considered vulnerable and at higher risk of losing their job than men. Losing a job or unemployment forces them to find other ways to earn money and cover daily expenses such as being a prostitute. For example, in Cambodia, up to 55% of sex workers in Cambodia enter the sector following the global economic crisis and job losses.
Okay, we move to the next question on how cuts in social saving and measure spending such as subsidy cut in social protection program, old age pension reform, and consumption tax increase on basic goods and services have detrimental effect, especially on poor households.
The first reason is the impact on change in household food consumption pattern. As a result of austerity measures in the economy, the cost of living of population increase, the price of essential goods is high, and purchasing power is getting smaller. Households are forced to spend a large amount of their income on food, thus neglecting aspects of food quality, health factor, and vitamin intake. The effect leaves many children deficient in nutrient, vitamin, prone to disease, and so on, or they are forced to eat food in small amounts so as to cause hunger and starvation. The second reason is increased case of stress, especially in poor and low-income households. The well-being of the population is deteriorating. Social cases are on the rise and crime is on the rise, result of losing a job and source of income to buy basic necessity. For example, women in Indonesia, Kenya, and Jamaica report increased stress due to additional household burden, reduced income and longer working hours, as well as increased domestic tension, which often lead to violence and will inevitably affect children in the home.
During this unfortunate pandemic, question comes up. Is furlough scheme used by companies to reduce the numbers of employees without getting any penalty? The furlough scheme is the implementation of a scheme in which workers are dismissed from work. The aim is to reduce the number of virus transmission in office clusters. Several countries have made this scheme as a policy to deal with COVID-19 pandemic, the UK being one of them. The royal government not only asked the employers to implement the furlough scheme, but also provided subsidies for employees who were unable to work because of the scheme. Those who are forced to stay at home due to the scheme still get an income of 80% of their normal salary, of which 70% is subsidy from the kingdom. The portion of subsidy fell to 60% in middle of 2020 as a sign for companies to adapt to the current condition as soon as possible. Another country that implement this scheme is the USA, but the difference is workers that are not going to their work because of this furlough scheme is not paid at all. In addition, the implementation of this furlough scheme aims to reduce the number of layoffs during this pandemic COVID-19. Companies can retain their employees while continuing to find ways to conduct their business activities in the midst of pandemic. Unfortunately, according to a study conducted by Cambridge University, 1 in 5 people are offered by the companies their work for violation of regulations, and 60% of employees who are on leave report still doing some work. These things indicate the occurrence of abuse and misuse of rights and need to be explored more deeply by the local government.
Global financial crisis is one of the big deals that might happen in the world, and 2008 was the year that witnessed the calamity. Ben Bernanke said it could have resulted in 1930s style global financial and economic meltdown with catastrophic implications. It caused a lot of damage to the US country and the states facing a hard time back then in 2008. So, what did the government do to combat it? Well, it did a lot. The Federal Reserve stepped in and offered to make emergency loan to banks. The idea was to prevent fundamentally sound banks from collapsing just because the lenders were panicking. The government enacted a program called TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, and which the rest of us call the bank bailout. This initially earmarked $700 billion to shore up the banks. It actually ended up spending $250 billion bailing out the banks and was later expanded to help automakers, AIG, American international groups, and homeowners. In combination with lending by the Federal Reserve, this helped stop the cascade of panic in the financial system. The Treasury also conducted stress tests on the largest Wall Street banks. Government accountants swarmed over bank balance sheets and publicly announced which ones were sound and which one needed to raise more money. This eliminated some of the uncertainties that had paralyzed lending among institutions. Congress also passed a huge stimulus package in January 2009. This pumped over $800 billion into the economy through new spending and tax cuts. This helped slow the free fall of spending, output, and employment. In 2010, Congress passed financial reform called the Dodd-Frank Law. It took steps to increase transparency and prevent banks from taking on so much risk. Dodd-Frank did a lot of things. It set up a Consumer Protection Bureau to reduce predatory lending. It required that financial derivatives be traded in exchanges that all market participants can observe. And it put mechanisms in place for large banks to fail in a controlled, predictable manner. But there's no consensus on whether this regulation is enough to prevent future crises. So what have we learned from all this? Well, one key factor that led to the 2008 financial crisis was perverse incentives. A perverse incentive is when a policy ends up having a negative effect opposite of what was intended, like mortgage brokers got bonuses for lending out more money but that encouraged them to make risky loans which hurt profits in the end.
Due to COVID-19, governments globally have implemented new policies to preserve their citizens' life and their economy. Unfortunately, the loss and financial assistance affect human rights and misuse of laws. It can be seen from the effect of implementation of lockdowns. Many people suffered, especially the poor and low-income groups, since they were unable to go to work. One way that the government can help to mitigate these issues is by introducing financial incentives to those who are in dire needs and out of work. In the economic sectors, the financial incentive must incorporate to include assistance to the essential services group like the legal firms, restaurants, and etc., as they are also hugely affected in this critical period. Secondly, abuse of law. During this pandemic, the rich and powerful often violated the laws as they are able to pay the compound regardless of the amount. In some cases, the authority gave unjustly low fines to the rich, whereas for laymen, they gave a higher compound. This type of treatment is unfair and double standard. Due to this scenario, a lot of people have lost their trust in the government. To mitigate this, the government should treat the people fairly no matter what their social status is, since this involves the dignity and trust of the people towards the government of the day.
From what has been described before, misuse and abuse of rights have an impact not only on a micro scale, such as children and women, but also a broad impact that includes countries and even the world. Amid a pandemic, it seems that every solution taken by either the private sector or the government will not be perfect. There is always something to be sacrificed, such as austerity and pull-off schemes. Both of them still had an expected impact on the parties concerned, in this case, low-income families and workers. Even so, we try to offer the concept of prevention as well as handling misuse and abuse of the rights during the COVID-19 pandemic, such as introducing financial incentives to those who are in dire need like the poor and low-income groups, and the government should treat the people fairly no matter what their social status or class to raise the society trust to the government.